What's going on, my rebel winners? This is the XRP scum here. Today in this video, we will go over Brad Garlinghouse's testifying in the Senate Banking Committee. It's a pretty big deal. We're also going to go over some new updates to the XRP Ledger, which entail the EVM Sidechain. Also, if you stick around to the end of the video, there's a fun little, I guess you could call it more on the conspiracy side of things, which is entertaining if you guys are into that kind of stuff. And it's going to involve China and basically how they were the first body member of implementing the ISO 20022 standards. So stick around for that, and let's start the show.
XRP scum, yeah, he's breaking it down. Every headline shaking this digital town. Got the facts, got the fire, ain't afraid to bite. XRP scum's here, shining the lights. So listen up, you heard it right.
All right, so if you guys are paying attention, there is a new Senate Banking Committee that is going to happen on July 9th. And who's testifying? Well, it's none other than the CEO of Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse himself. This hearing aims to basically provide more clear guidelines and regulatory framework for all of digital assets. And well, what do we know about XRP? If you go back in history of the XRP versus Ripple lawsuit, we can already figure out that in July 2023, that XRP in and of itself was already deemed a non-security in a court of law. So what is this really going to entail? We're all going to be waiting and seeing what this, Wednesday action this week is going to entail. So we all know how Brad Garlinghouse and Ripple has been pushing to capture as much volume on the XRP ledger as they possibly can. This committee will aim to basically provide more clear jurisdiction, and like we've already said before, this whole new crypto asset is a new unregulated asset space. So in the beginning, we saw the SEC trying to acquire jurisdiction, and it didn't really work out in their favor. So now what the government is doing is they're stepping in and saying, okay, we need to take this to the next level, because what needs to happen is we need clearer guidelines. We need the regulations. We need these 3- and 4-letter organizations to work in harmony together to provide the clarity that has been needed for several years now. So this will basically be, in my opinion, I think this will be the end-all be-all at the end of whatever motion that they're going for. They'll come out on the other side with the determination of which of the two dogs that are barking at each other, essentially, which we got the CFTC on one side and then the SEC on the other. And they're basically just trying to get as much of the regulatory landscape jurisdiction as they possibly can. So this is going to basically foster a wider institutional regulatory framework for all of digital assets. And why is it important that Brad Garlinghouse is testifying? Well, we can go over that. It's because, as you guys should have already caught on, and I feel like most of the XRP army is already kind of figuring it out. So I don't need, this message isn't necessarily for the majority of, the XRP army. I don't know, I really don't like to say that because it sounds kind of like a cult, but it's really not. It's just, we've got people in the XRP army who have saw the bigger picture from the beginning as opposed to the rest of retail, in my opinion. So why is it important that Brad Garlinghouse is there? Well, the reason that he's there is because he is the strongest leader, and objectively so, in my opinion, that they decided to select him for that role to help promote a more I would say even agnostic, which might be saying, oh, well, no, he's just trying to biasly promote XRP. That might be going on a little bit, but it's only because it's objectively true that XRP is the best digital asset as far as mechanics go to actually get the job done for what they're trying to do. The XRP Ledger aims to be crypto agnostic, embracing more volume coming onto the XRP Ledger, so we could have cross-border payments settle in 3 to 5 seconds regardless of what asset is being processed through the XRP Ledger. Now, as we all know, Ethereum. Let's go over that for a second. One of the biggest bottlenecks in all of Ethereum, basically, or I would argue many other projects in general, has been the slow speeds, the ridiculous fees that, people are forced to have to pay depending on what time of the day, Well, those are the negative consequences of, using Ethereum. However, there is a new addition to the XRP Ledger. It's called the EVM Sidechain, which stands for Ethereum Virtual Machine. So what that's going to do is all of the people that have been studying certain topics that really only exclusively involve Ethereum and other projects like smart contracts. Well, the XRP Ledger doesn't really offer that many smart contracts. We don't really use that. It's not a mechanism that is really native to the XRP Ledger. However, it's things like that, DeFi and a few other things that aren't really a big talking point for the XRP Ledger. So what this is going to do is it's basically going to create a bridge now with all of that information that the people have been studying, because if we know the XRP Ledger has positioned itself to be the most sought after global mechanism to facilitate not just cross-border payments, but micro payments and many other facets as well. So now all of that information isn't going by the wayside when basically the XRP Ledger gets streamlined for mainstream use case. So now you can use all of that information and apply it to the XRP Ledger. All right, now as promised, here's for the fun side. This is a little conspiratorial if you're into that kind of thing. But as we know, what is ISO 200.2.2? Well, ISO 200.2.2 is a payment standards that many other companies, especially the banks and crypto standards, are going to have to comply with in order to keep their head above water and actually thrive. But did you guys know that China was the very first one to actually fully implement it? And yes, I'm talking about how the notion that anything socialism and communism is usually starting with China. I wasn't really even thinking about this before, but it's kind of crazy, we already can see what's happening miles ahead into the future, so that's why we're investing in this. And nothing I say is investor advice or financial advice in any way. I'm just a random influencer on the internet, and I'm just trying to get a message out there to basically help educate people. It's going to be a very confusing situation because I see time and time again that people just don't understand it. So we've heard over and over and over, almost like an echo chamber effect, where the U.S. needs to pick up the pace. The U.S. is the last one. The U.S. this, the U.S. that. Well, yeah, there's a reason why we're the last ones. Because, like I said, it all starts with China when it comes to anything socialist or communism. Well, that's kind of what is in front of our path regardless. We can't do anything about it. So, yes, it's a great investment and everything. But where we're going to find ourselves in the future is basically the beast system. And it's biblically predicted. The XRP Ledger is basically going to bring on the introduction of the beast system. It's all going to be on the blockchain, and then you're going to have to get a mark on your hand to buy or sell. But let's not focus on that right now, because the focus should be, do you want to be the poor or do you want to be the rich? And it's not about, how much money you can make. It's not about being rich. It's about not being the latter here. Because if you want to save your friends and family from having to eat out of a dumpster like I do, then it might be a good investment for you. Like I said, not investment advice. Nothing I say is financial advice in any way whatsoever. But when you start looking into these kind of things and you start thinking a little bit more on the lines of how I do. So let's go over where the ISO will go fully live. It's actually in the United States. We're finally there. We got the green light for this month, July 14th. And I have actually got a pretty good list here. I'm going to go actually break this out because it's a pretty extensive list. And I think it'll get us to the finish line a little bit quicker if I just hold this list here. We got Canada, all right? It says to be announced in 2025. But where we're at, the United States, like I said, July 14th. So we've got about a week left for that. Swift globally, all right? So for that, basically going to take out the chunk of the rest of the countries that aren't fully on board yet, because Swift is a payments messaging standard and it affects everything pretty much globally. So on November 22nd, that's a date that you guys got to watch out for, by the way, because the ISO becomes mandatory. We got a few countries that are still, well, the UK, Europe, and Japan are all the three ones that will be heavily most effective in that area. Then, okay, so what do we have here? Amazing discovery I had with China. 2013. That's 1 year after the creation of the XRP Ledger. They gobbled that shit up so fast. So then we have Switzerland in 2014. These are all ISO standard payments that have been implemented, by the way, have already done. Then we've got India, 2015. Japan, also 2015. Then Europe, which was incremental. They did it in slowly, basically, gradually. Where the EU was 2008 to 2009, and then fully completed its full cycle at March 2023. Now, we could break that down a little bit more and take you guys a step of the way. But the point is, Australia started out in February 2018, and then finalized it in November 2022. Singapore, 2022. Thailand, mid-2022. And then in South Africa, it was 2023. So now, last place, like most things that reek of communism, the United States. So when all of this is done, basically we'll be in a new environment where we're one step closer to the beast system. And you all know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that number. But I don't want to scare any of you guys. But the point is, you can either swim with the sharks or get gobbled up like a fish. That's all I got for you guys today. XRP Scum is out.